were taught is that power is the ability to define phenomena and make it act in a desired manner. That's what Huey taught us.
All power to the people. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All power
All
to the
right.
people.
Yes, sir. Look, I want to welcome y'all, young people, old people, and in between, healers, activists, mutual aid groups all over the planet. I want to welcome you in to the People's Dinner Party. And buddy, do we got a good one for you today? A good one for you today. We got Mr. Aaron Dixon, the captain of the Seattle chapter of the Black Panther Party. Now, hopefully I don't mess this up. I'm gonna leave y'all for a minute so I can read off all this brother's credits, okay? And this long too, because this brother powerful, okay? All right. As an adolescent, Mr. Dixon marched with Dr. Martin Luther King to end housing discrimination in Seattle, and one of the first volunteers to participate in the busing program to integrate schools. King's assassination on April 4th, 1964, deeply affected Mr. Dixon and propelled him toward the Black Power movement. That week, Mr. Dixon and his brother Elmer were in San Francisco for the West Coast Black Student Union Conference. During that time, attended the funeral of little Bobby Hutton, one of the first members of the Black Panther Party at 14 and one of the first ones to die. Bobby Hutton, a member of the Black Panther Party, killed on April 6th in a confrontation with the police. Following the funeral, Mr. Dixon met some of the Black Panther leadership, such as Bobby Seale and Kathleen Cleaver, who made a vivid impression upon him. The time spent in San Francisco led Mr. Dixon, the Dixon brothers actually, to set up the first Black Panther chapter in California and Seattle. While a member of the Black Panther Party, Mr. Dixon started free breakfast for children program that fed thousands of hungry African American children. And he helped open a free community medical and legal clinic. The clinic continues this day as the Carolyn Downs Family Medical Center. Mr. Dixon also became involved in electoral politics when he worked on the mayoral campaign of Lionel Wilson, who was elected as the first Black mayor of Oakland, California in 1979. After leaving the Panthers, Mr. Dixon worked for several nonprofit organizations focusing on drug and gang violence and working with homeless youth. In 2002, he funded the Central House, a nonprofit providing transitional housing for homeless youth. Central House also has a youth leadership project that operates at 4 Seattle public schools. It teaches the youth positively graduate high school and control their own destinies. It also teaches them the importance of saving their community. Mr. Dixon is the father of 6 and lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. People's Dinner Party, welcome the Mr. Aaron Dixon. Come on in, sir. How you doing today?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
Man, a C4 couldn't blow the smile off my face. I'm so happy to be with you and Chris today. Chris, say hello to Mr. Dixon.
Hey, thanks for being here, Mr. Dixon. Really appreciate it.
Hello, Chris.
Right
Thank
on.
you for having me.
Well, look, I did some research on you, like I was supposed to. I did some research, and it seemed like me and you on the same page as far as like origin story and where we come from. Because when I first got started and I wanted to get involved in socio-political politics, I wondered, how did I wind up like this here? So I had to do some research in my family and found out that I had some pretty amazing people who were involved in unions in the West Virginia coal mines. So what I like to do is to ask you to start with your origin story. Start with your family first.
My On my mother's side, my family resided in Mississippi,
Okay.
and
Excuse me.
my great great grandmother, who was born in 1864, I did research on her family, and it's extensive. It's I won't go into details, but
Okay.
she raised my grandmother, who my grandmother's mother died when she was uh, 3 years old, and her father was a German Jewish man who she never knew.
All right.
Uh, so she was raised by grandma, my great great grandmother, and my grandmother's husband was Roy Sledge, whose father was a blacksmith, from what I
Wow.
understand, one of the only blacksmiths in this part of Mississippi, and he rode a white horse. These are the,
Dig that. Wow.
and then on my father's side, my father's great 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 grandparents, the plantation that they lived on when the slavery, when the Civil War ended. Well, first of all, I had two great uncles. I had a great uncle and a great great grandfather who fought in the Civil War, were some of the first volunteers to fight in the Civil War from Kentucky.
Okay.
And um, and when the Civil War ended, the slave master left the plantation to my grandparents' family, and
Wow.
everything in it, all the furniture and everything. And
Wow.
so they took that land, and the land. I actually had my great great uncle and great great grandfather actually got 40 acres, and
Wow.
they took that 40 acres and the land from the plantation and created their own town called Brooksville.
Mm.
So it was a very on that side of the family was you could tell the pride that my grandmother had,
Right
uh,
on.
and 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 um, and her husband, Elmer Dixon the first, his um, mother died, and he never knew his mother. His father left, and he was raised by his aunts. Um, and his father went to St. Louis and became a millionaire.
Wow.
But he never would recognize his son. So I could always see the pain in my grandfather on that side, that he felt from that. But he was a very strong, he was big and very proud man. He never allowed his wife to work. He did all the working, and he provided, and was able to buy a house, and he was a very happy man. And he used to say all the time. He used to tell us kids that he'd say, "Look at my skin, it's red." It's
Mm.
red. So we think that he had some Native American in him.
Right.
So he had two kids, which was my Aunt Doris and my father, Elmer Dixon, uh, this Junior.
Okay.
That's my origin story. In terms, there's a lot more. It would take a
Right
long time
on.
to go into detail.
I appreciate that. So how were you as a youth? When did you decide to I read in the intro, but if you could fill us in a little bit, How did you actually get involved as a youth um, with civil rights movement?
Well, I was kind of a strange kid in some ways. When we lived in Birch Village in Champaign, Illinois,
Hmm.
when I was, like in first grade, second grade, and there were gangs. There was the Birch Village gang, and there was the Alley Cats. And I
Wow.
remember, having these battles back and forth, back and forth. And I also remember that I could not wait until I got a little older. I could join the Birch Village Cats and be part of that gang. I wanted to be part of that gang.
Right.
Uh, and then we used to go to Chicago, where my parents were from, and we saw the signs of the Blackstone Rangers everywhere. Blackstone
Right on.
Rangerettes, and I could, that intrigued me.
Right.
That intrigued me. And I did have a cousin who did eventually join an element of the Blackstone Rangers. Um, so that's one of the reasons why my father, he got a job offer to move to Seattle. He got other job offers, but I think one thing he was concerned about was us being in one of those gangs, and
Right.
that's why we moved west. Um, but my father used to call me. He said I was nothing but a dreamer because I used
Mm.
to dream all the time. I was a daydreamer. I dreamed all the time. And my grandmother always used to say I was going to be a minister because I was a deep thinker.
Right.
Um, and I wanted to, growing up, I used to tell my parents that I wanted to go to a military academy,
Okay.
all the time. I felt like that was, something that I was interested in, that was out of the abnormal. But of course, my parents always refused that. So, but I like all the young people in my generation, we grew up watching the civil rights movement unfold on TV. We
Okay.
saw all the injustice that was taking place, Martin Luther King, the bombing in Birmingham, the death of the four black girls, the water hoses being sprayed on the young people in Birmingham, Alabama, and the racist Bull Connor making his racist statements on TV. There was another thing that really struck me was they used to have this thing called Friday night fights,
Right.
and oftentimes a lot of the fights would be black fighters. And so,
Okay.
we would gather as a family. This was in elementary school. We would gather on Friday nights with our parents to watch the fights. And, it seemed like almost every fight between a black and a white, even though the black fighter won, the white fighter was announced as the winner. And it
Mm.
upset my parents. My parents are always very angry about that. So just growing up, seeing those types of things, those types of injustices, um, it played a major role on my generation. Being exposed to that and knowing that our ancestors were actually slaves. We could actually identify people in our family who grew up under slavery and
Right
had
on.
to deal with that racism in the Deep South. And also, we had the oral tradition back then. We had our grandparents and our aunts and uncles. We had time where we just sit on the porch and they would just pass down all these stories to us.
Right.
Good or bad. And the oral tradition is something we don't have anymore. Of course, there
Mhm.
were some black people who were so traumatized from what happened, they didn't want to share those stories with their young people, but those
Right.
stories were shared with our family. Uh,
Okay.
so when Emmett Till passed away, was murdered, my
Right.
father wrote a poem. and it's in my book. And my
Wow.
wrote a poem about the death of Emmett Till. My father was an artist. He was a painter, and he was a poet. And this was really a beautiful poem that he wrote. Very deep, emotional poem. And it was so deep and emotional. I memorized the poem, and I would take it to school in elementary school, and I would ask the teacher if I could read it to the class.
Is it possible to hear some of it today?
Oh shit! You have a?
We can wait.
I don't even have a copy of my book because it's in my
Oh,
book.
okay.
You got a copy of
Okay.
my book? No?
Okay.
Okay. Um, I know a few lines. Deep in the heart of Texas, where the cotton blooms in June, an old black man tills the farm, humming a sad, sad tune. They took a little Negro boy and and cut and tortured his body and threw him in the river. And it goes on to say that, during the trial, the white men drank beer and laughed and joked, and poor Emmett Till, I could, that's it. That's all I can remember of the
Yeah.
poem. So
Yeah.
for
I remember.
those,
Yeah.
if you're interested, people who are interested, I suggest you go to the book and read the poem. It's a very powerful poem.
What and what is the name? Just for the audience, what's the name of the book? One more time. What's the name of the
My
book?
People Are Rising,
All
Memoir
right.
of a Black Panther Party Captain.
All right. And where can we get it? Like, the regular places like
You can
Amazon and
order
places
you
like
can
that.
order from Amazon. You can get it from Amazon.
Okay. Hey, look, man, we need y'all. Look, young folks, we need y'all to go out there, man, and save a little bit of that bud money and that drink money, and go out there, man, and get Mr. Dixon's book, and educate yourself, man, on what it means to be a black man, a black family in the United States of America. Go ahead, Mr. Dixon.
Okay, so when when I found out Martin Luther King was coming into town, I told my parents I wanted to be there.
Okay.
And so I was there. I was there at 13 years old, and you know, uh, participating in this protest against redlining that was taking place in Seattle. And so Martin Luther King was there because black people, even in Seattle, were segregated to what was called the Suncere area. We couldn't rent or buy a home anywhere outside of the Central area. And so
Okay.
Martin Luther King was brought to town to protest that redlining. And I remember marching with, standing right next to King, and I asked him how
Wow.
he didn't have any bodyguard. And
Wow.
I can't remember what the answer was, but I told him he needed to have some bodyguards. And so when we got to the end of the march, and there was a big platform set up for him to speak at Garfield Park, I remember making my way to the bandstand where he was speaking, and just looking out on the crowd, because at that age I had already witnessed the assassination of John F. Kennedy, who was president of the United States,
Mhm.
as well as the assassination of Medgar Evers. So I was
Right on.
worried about Martin Luther King being assassinated. So after I met him, that inspired me to join the civil rights movement in Seattle. And when they initiated the busing the school program to integrate the schools, I volunteered to, integrate an all-white school.
Was that
Um,
a family decision, or that's something that
that was
the
that
folks
was my
left up?
decision. That was my decision. Of
Right
course,
on.
I told my parents that's what I wanted to do,
Right.
and they let me do it.
Okay.
So, and there was only one other black kid at the school. It wasn't too bad, but the following year, we graduated to the high school, which was called Queen Anne, and there was a lot more racism there. There was an incident where Queen Anne all-white high school, played Garfield in all-black high school for the city championship, and it was a very blatant thing that happened where Garfield, the black team, was ahead by 2 points, and they called a foul on one of their black players, and the other team went to the free throw line and won the game. But it's very obvious to everybody that it was just outright racism and cheating. And so
Right.
there was a big fight that occurred after the game. You know, black people were extremely mad, and people just went on a rampage. And when I went to school that day, I was met with a lot of racism, a lot of stares. People I thought who were my friends were no longer talking to me. And I decided that that was my last year of experimenting with trying to integrate into an all-white school. And I went back to Garfield High School.
Right on.
Yeah. And Garfield High School, where Jimi Hendrix and Quincy Jones went to school.
Wow.
And it was a very proud black school.
Right on.
And then, I was not a good student. I was in trouble a lot. Matter of fact, I wasn't. I was a trouble kid. I was one of the only kid in my family that got the police came looking for me for a break-in of an incident, and because I didn't have a record, the other kids I was with had a record. They were arrested, and I wasn't arrested.
Right.
But I was, hanging out with gangs at that age and carrying switchblades and push-button knives. This was in middle school. I
Right.
was, I had several switchblade knives, and that was the thing back then.
Right.
All the bad acting brothers had knives. So that's one of the reasons why I transferred to the all-white school, because I was going down a bad path.
Right.
So anyway, I barely graduated from high school by the skin of my teeth, and I got into writing poetry, and I got into acting, and working with this brother who wrote a play called General's Coup about a black revolution, and a black general who goes crazy when they seize the Capitol. And I was the lieutenant, his son, who had more sense reasoning than him. And so, we performed that play all over the place. And I concentrated on writing poetry, and then I got into the University of Washington. I got a scholarship into the University of Washington, and I became a much better student. I became an A student, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
And there were only 35 of us black people on campus.
Right.
So we formed the first black student union in the Northwest at the University of Washington.
Okay.
And we had a lot of, we had a connection with San Francisco State College. The head of the BSU at San Francisco State, Jimmy Garrett, came to Seattle on many times to speak to us while they were having the strike at San Francisco State, demanding a Black Studies program. Ron Dellums, who was on the city council of Berkeley at the time,
Okay.
a good friend of Huey's and a good friend of Bobby's, a good friend of the Black Panther Party. He came and spoke with us on many, many occasions. We started getting more militant, that militancy just continued to grow. When Martin Luther King was the BSU, one of the things we did at the BSU was we marched on a school called Franklin High School and closed it down because they didn't have any people of color working as teachers or administrators. And there was an incident where a black kid and a white kid got in a fight. The black kid got kicked out. The white kid didn't. So we led a big demonstration on the school, and we closed it down. And we had a big rally after, we drove the principal out, all the teachers left, and we had a big rally in the auditorium of the school. That was like a big major victory for us
Wow.
that we were able to do that.
Right
But
on.
uh, about 3 or 4 weeks later, the police arrived at my house and arrested me and charged me uh, with I can't remember, but they arrested the other leaders of the BSU, as well as my brother who was in high school and Anthony Ware who was in high school. They arrested them, and they were taken to juvenile. We were taken to King County Jail, and we're the first time any of us had been to jail, and so. But while we were there, that was the same day. That was the same day that Martin Luther King was assassinated. And we saw it on TV that Martin Luther King had been assassinated. Of course, we were very angry. There's a lot of tension. The black inmates wanted to attack the white inmates, and we were able to talk reason to them and keep that from happening.
Right on.
When we got out on bail, we heard about a Black Student Union conference at San Francisco State. So we got a bunch of cars, rented some cars. We just connected the mileage gauge on the cars so we wouldn't be charged for the mileage. And we drove to the Bay Area and to attend the conference at San Francisco State College. Then we
Okay.
heard that there was going to be a funeral in Oakland for little Bobby Hutton. So a bunch of us,
Okay.
brother and Anthony Ware, we went over to the church where the funeral was being held in Oakland, and on the way we stopped and bought some black berets
Right.
to fit in, and then we went to the church. We saw Marlon Brando standing out front,
Wow.
and he had a black beret on and a leather jacket.
Gone now.
We went in to the church, and the church was surrounded with members of the Black Panther Party, and the Hutton family was in the front rows, and you could hear the mournings of the mothers and the aunts and everybody. And there was a procession that went around and reviewed the casket of little Bobby Hutton. And I remember just looking at that casket of little Bobby Hutton. He was only 14 years old when he joined the party, and he was 17 years old when he died as a member of the Black Panther Party, being murdered by the Oakland police. And what had happened was that when Martin Luther King was assassinated, riots started breaking out all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
And Huey had sent orders out, because Huey was in jail by this time. He sent orders out for Panthers to go out on the streets and tell people not to riot. Now, Eldridge Cleaver had something else in mind. He wanted to seek retribution, so he gathered a bunch of Panthers together, and they armed themselves, and they went out searching for police, and they ended up in a shootout. And Eldridge and little Bobby Hutton ended up in this abandoned house, and the police surrounded it and shot thousands of rounds of ammo into the house, including tear gas. And the only thing they could do was surrender. And little Bobby Hutton came out, and he helped Eldridge out. And the police told little Bobby Hutton to run to the police car, and they shot him about 20 times.
Damn.
That's how little Bobby Hutton was killed. And so here we are standing in front of his casket. And to us, this was like looking into the future of what the life was going to be like as a Black revolutionary. That
Right.
death was going to be
Imminent.
imminent, yes.
Yep.
So after that, we went to San Francisco State College, back to San Francisco State College to the conference where Bobby Seale came in with Kathleen Cleaver and other Panthers and gave an electrifying speech. After his speech, my brother and I made a beeline to Bobby Seale and told him we wanted to have a Black Panther Party chapter in Seattle.
Right on.
A week later, he comes to Seattle and we have a big meeting at my parents' house. Must have been over 20 young people were there. Some bought weapons, and we met for 2 or 3 days talking about the Black Panther Party. One of the first things that Bobby told us was that we had to have 2,000 rounds of ammo and 2 weapons.
Mm.
So, most of us were college students, so this was kind of like some heavy stuff
Right.
given us. But he, went on to talk about Huey, how important Huey was, and about the discipline of the party. And we were given a book list of 25 books and told that we had to read 2 hours a day. We had to study the books. And he asked the question of who was going to be captain. And I was surprised, but a lot of people said that I should be captain. I became captain.
Right on.
First chapter outside the state of California. Bobby was on his way to New York, and he had asked me to go with him, but I needed some time to think about this new change in my life. I wasn't prepared to just jump in right away, but
Right on.
so and that's how we became the first chapter outside the state of California.
Man, that's an amazing story. And I've heard the little Bobby Hutton story like almost 100 times in the last 20 years. And even when I read the book, I don't remember either in Seize the Time or Kathleen Cleaver's book that the police told little Bobby to run for his car and shot him that many times, a bunch of cowards, it's the first time I've ever heard of that. And yeah, so thank you for broadening that story out for me. Also too, when I was doing, like I said, doing my research, I see that you are, very passionate about the LA chapter of the Black Panther Party too.
Yeah, I definitely am because for a lot of reasons. One was because Bunchy Carter was the Deputy Minister of Defense of the Southern California chapter.
Shout out to Bunch.
But yeah, Bunchy, and I had a chance to meet Bunchy very briefly at
That's amazing, man. That's
at,
amazing.
at national headquarters, and I just met him very briefly. But he had a very princely way about him.
Right on.
There was just something about him that really stuck out. He was with Elaine Brown at the time,
Okay.
and yeah, well, at the LA chapter was was under the most fascist police department in America, if not in the world.
Right
And
on. LAPD.
LA Police PD.
Yeah.
Just being in LA with the Black Panther Party uniform on, your life was at risk every day.
Right on.
And I remember one of the first, there were other murders that had happened, but the first murder that stuck out when we had our office in Seattle was the murder of the 3 young Panthers. I think the 2 of them were brothers, the Bartholomew brothers, and one
I
other.
remember. Okay.
Yeah, they were shot to death at a gas station.
Right.
And I would meet many LA Panthers during my tenure in the Black Panther Party, and everybody, if you don't know about the shootout that they had, which was very powerful, I could talk a little bit about that. But just back up a little bit,
Yes, sir.
after I was appointed captain, a week later, I was called by Bobby Seale to come to Oakland.
Yes, sir.
And so I went to Oakland with my Panther uniform on, and I was met at the airport by Robert Bay and Tommy Jones, two Panther comrades, and we went back to the office, and I met. It took me to Landon and Randy Williams' house. Landon and Randy Williams were two brothers who had been in the army, and they were captains in the Black Panther Party now, and they were all very excited to see that there was a captain, out of the state of California.
Right on.
So, they were very excited to show me their armory and all their weapons and their reloading equipment.
Right on.
And then I spent time with Bobby Seale traveling around. Then I went to a Central Committee meeting where Stokely Carmichael was present, David Hilliard,
Wow.
Don Cox, the Field Marshal of the Black Panther Party,
Wow. Right
and
on.
many other Panther officials, Bill Brent, who would hijack a plane and end up in Cuba,
Right
and,
on.
and Captain Crutch, and so that was very an important meeting for me. A day or two later,
Wow.
I was with Robert Bay and Landon and Randy and another brother named Orlando Harris, who was who went on to Sacramento when the Panthers protested against the gun legislation. Orlando was only 16 years old, and there's pictures of him. He's got a kind of a light complected brother. He's got an afro. He's got a toothpick sticking out of his mouth, and he's holding a shotgun.
Right.
So we all went out to dinner in West Oakland one night on a Friday, and me and Orlando finished our eating, so we went out to smoke a cigarette because everybody smoked cool cigarettes all the
Yeah.
time. Standing on the corner, a police car goes by, and Orlando starts yelling. He starts saying, "You pigs, you motherfucking pigs, you better stop." And I start yelling too. So we're both out there just yelling at the police. And then pretty soon, Robert Bay and Orlando and Tommy Jones and Landon and Randy, they come out of the restaurant. And then about, three carloads of police show up, 4 carloads of police show up. And they jump out of the cars and they start questioning us. And I remember, you could hear the people in the background yelling, "There's going to be a shootout. There's going to be a shootout." And people are running. People are going home. People are getting out of the way. This is the same corner where Huey had his altercation with the police that ended up that caused him to end up in jail, and the death of one
Wow.
person and the wounding of another, and Huey with 2 bullet holes in his stomach.
Wow.
And so, pretty soon the streets were deserted, and I remember the police were all bunched together, and Robert Bay said, he said, "Spread out." He was telling us to spread out.
Right.
So we spread out. We were all armed, and then the only people that were left on the streets were the prostitutes. They were
Right.
across the street, and we could hear them. They said, "We ain't going nowhere. We're gonna stay here. We're gonna stay out here with our brothers."
Right on.
Um, and so the police decided they wanted to try to check us for weapons, and this one lieutenant, he was the only one that seemed like he wasn't scared. He might have been to Vietnam or something, but he started walking towards Landon with his hand on his weapon, and saying, "I'm going to search you." And Landon, just earlier before we went down to West Oakland, while we were in the kitchen smoking Brother Ruby and drinking Bitter Dog. Bitter Dog was the Panther drink.
Piss.
Dark Panther piss, dark port wine and lemon juice. And Brother Ruby was marijuana, code name for marijuana. So we're
Right on.
all there getting high, and Landon didn't get high. He's in the living room watching TV, and we hear a loud bang, and we all run into the living room, and Landon's holding his 45 revolver, saying he got tired of watching the Cowboys always killing the Indians, and he shut his TV out.
Damn.
So now, a couple of hours later, we're down in West Oakland, surrounded by police, and Landon is out front, and the police are walking towards Landon, saying, "We want to search you." Well, thinking in my mind is, hey, Landon ain't gonna be searched. Landon, from what I saw, Landon ain't gonna hesitate to use his weapon.
Nice.
So
Not Stevie.
we all had our hands on our weapons, and we all felt like we were gonna die that night.
Right.
And as the police officer kept approaching Landon, him saying, "I'm gonna search you," Landon saying, "No, you're not gonna search me." And I remember seeing a young high school boy with a McClymonds Letterman's jacket on, holding a bag of groceries, and our eyes met, and I didn't say the words, but he could feel what I was thinking was that
Right.
I wish you would stay here and help us. And he looked at me and said, "Brother, I would help you, but I got to get home." And he and so I was prepared to die. We were all prepared to die that night.
Right on.
Um, as Landon was backing up, he tripped over a metal garbage can top, which vibrated, and he jumped back up with his hand on his weapon, and this seemed to break the ice because the police just stopped and they turned around and they left.
Right.
So, word spread through the, Black Panther Party down there that the standoff we had had. And so that was my baptism into the Black Panther Party that
That was a
night.
hell of a baptism.
Yeah, that night on 7th Street. And the next day was a meeting of all the Panthers in the Bay Area at St. Augustine's Church. And there were Panthers there from Vallejo, from San Mateo, Marin County, Frisco, Oakland, everywhere, Berkeley. Must have over 100 people were there,
Elder,
And
speak real quick. Permission
pardon?
to speak. Permission
Oh,
to speak.
yes, go ahead.
Okay, you said, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but something popped up I think, in my memory. St. Augustine Church, wasn't that the first place the Black Panther Party started the Children's Free Breakfast program?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
That
My bad for disturbing you. Go
Oh,
ahead,
no,
Elder.
that's okay. That's okay. And so, I was just very glad, very honored to be there and to meet everybody. It was like a family. It's like I had inherited a new family, you
Yes,
know.
sir.
And the Black Panther Party would become my family, as it would other members. That was our new family now.
Right
And
on.
so I did get a chance to go visit Huey while I was there. I went down to the Alameda County Jail to visit Huey. And the last thing he told me was, "Never turn your back to the pigs.
Right on.
They'll shoot you in the back." And that was something that stuck with me that I would never forget. And then I was on my way back to Oakland the next day. Back to Seattle to, put together the chapter in Seattle.
Right on. Right on. The reason why I had jumped out there a little earlier and rushed to talk about the LA chapter of the Black Panther Party, because I think we may have like a mutual friend that played a big role in that party's function, and that's Mr. Ronald Freeman, Elder Freeman.
Yes, right. Elder Freeman, yes.
Right,
Oh,
Mr. Freeman. I met Freeman, man, long time ago. It's hard to believe. I've known him for almost, I would say, 20 years.
hmm
He had came out from California to stay with one of our other elders, Shuja Graham, who was Supreme Commander during the in the Black Guerrilla family,
Okay.
and he came out to stay with Shuja, and I spent a lot of time with Shuja. I mean, like a lot of time. I helped him with his landscaping company. I worked for his landscaping company and all this, and I got so blessed to be around Shuja and Elder Freeman. Freeman wound up staying with us for a year.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was amazing to have both of those brothers in my life, like in bookends like that. You know, they would come over my house because I used to, when you first get started, you be so enamored by the elders and everything. You just want to be around them all the time and soak up as much information as you possibly can. And so when they came over to the house, they were sitting. They had went around. They had met people at the front when they told them to come around back because we had a little cookout going. And so I come downstairs and I run out the back door, and Freeman and Shuja sitting in the backyard with a case of Heineken, and an ounce of Bud. And I'm like, I'm thinking like the Black Panthers, are so pure. And I was looking, I said, who in the hell gave him this weed? It was like he brought it himself, So I spent a lot of nights with hearing stories, Shuja stories and Elder Freeman stories about California and what it is to be a Black revolutionary during that time period. And at Shuja's house, I got to meet some other folks too. Donald Cox's wife, I got to meet her. And I got to meet Blood McQuarrie. He came over to Shuja's house. I mean, man, through him, I got so blessed to meet so many wonderful revolutionaries and everything. But Freeman, I want to say shout out to Elder Freeman. Freeman, man, if you can hear me, I miss you.
Mhm.
I miss you, man. I miss
Amen.
you so much. I
Yeah.
miss you so goddamn. It's my show. I guess I can cuss. Freeman, I miss you so goddamn much, man. I had you to interview. I wish I had my shit together before you passed away. Freeman meant so much to me when I opened up my first children's free breakfast program. Imagine having an elder Panther with the history of Freeman sitting in the chair when I opened the door for the kids for the breakfast program, and he's sitting there, in his Stacey Adams and in his overalls and his long gray dreadlocks, and his Rasta cross around his chest, and he was just amazing to me, man. And I miss him. I miss him. And while I'm on the subject of fallen elders, I want to Marshall Eddie Conway. I love you and I miss you too. I miss you so much, man. And I kind of, still don't have words to describe the hurt that I felt when I found out that you had passed away. Another brother, Lawrence Hayes, who's not, his name is not out there like most folks. He's part of the Black Panther Party in California. I mean, not in California, but in New York. And he taught me a lot, and I miss him dearly as well. And but yeah, the next thing I wanted to talk about was okay. Right now we going through, and the whole planet going through a lot. And I see you wearing your scarf, in support of this Palestinian people, but we were talking yesterday, we discussed that, unfortunately, Palestine is not the only place genocide is happening. We have several wars, genocidal wars, fighting for self-determination going on throughout Africa. And you had mentioned the Sudan. Could you, tell us a little bit more what's going on in the Sudan as well? And we definitely getting back to Palestine.
Yeah. Yeah. Sudan is, of course, Sudan was one of the most, uh, one of the most independent countries in Africa. I mean, they had food. They had everything in Sudan. I mean, they had a big agricultural system. They had oil. They had everything that a country needed to um, be successful.
Right.
Um, and that's why the British, led had them colonized for such a long time because it was such an important place.
Right.
But right now, because I can't remember how long ago, maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, the people rose up and demanded a independent Sudan, and they were promised by the general who took office that they would have democracy and that they would have a time to elect the desired leader that they wanted. But
Right.
that never happened. The military decided to keep control of Sudan,
Right.
and um, and there was this other rebel force called the Janjaweed, who
Wow.
had was a militia army who had helped Sudan in terms of their military. But the Janjaweed also was a very negative uh, paramilitary force that went into southern Sudan and
Right.
killed thousands of people and tortured thousands of people.
Wow.
That's what you have now in Sudan. You have the military government and you have the Janjaweed who are fighting each other for control of Sudan. And it's been horrendous. I mean, we're not getting any news out of Sudan, but thousands of people are being killed. Thousands of women are being raped. They have the largest displacement of children in the world in Sudan. And there's really a lot of horror stories that are coming out of Sudan. And it's just, it's horrible that, that this is going on there. Of course we know about what's going on in Palestine, but um, um, there are other places in Africa, the Congo, when Patrice Lumumba was the first democratically elected president
Shout out to
of Africa, was assassinated by the CIA in '69.
right.
Uh, the Congo's never had its freedom and its independence because it's the most wealthy country in the world in terms of its mineral resources. That's where they get all the materials for computers and cell phones and atomic bombs and diamonds and everything. So it's been kept unstable so that the corporations of the world could continue to exploit it for all its resources. And this has been going on since, after the murder of Patrice Lumumba in '59. There's
Yes,
thousands
sir.
of women are being raped, and it's just a horrible situation. Another place that we don't talk about that is in the darkest, Kashmir. The Kashmir has been invaded by India because
Right.
Kashmiris, they want their freedom.
Right.
Um, and so right now, Kashmir is the most militarized country in the world, even more than Gaza. And tremendous atrocities are being committed against the Kashmiri people by India. Um, and that's something that we should never forget about. Also, the Uyghurs in China, who are the Muslims in China, who have been persecuted for the last 10 years or so. The Uyghurs are living in concentration camps,
Right.
indoctrination centers, and the oppression by the Chinese people on the Uyghurs is unimaginable. But Palestine, I've been to Palestine, and I spent 14 days in Palestine, met many Palestinians, and saw some really horrible things that Palestinians are enduring uh,
Wow.
in their country, and the militarization of um, of the West Bank. You know, while I was there, we traveled all throughout the whole West Bank, and we traveled to Israel. And you know, everywhere you went in the West Bank was Israeli soldiers with M16s, their fingers on the trigger, uh,
Wow.
and you know they were taking homes away from Palestinians, families, destroying the olive trees, and just you know I could spend so much time on what I saw over there.
I
There's a documentary. If I don't know if you could get it, it's called Five Broken Cameras. It was
I,
by. You heard of
yeah.
that?
I haven't, but I got plenty of time to check it out today.
Yeah, yeah. So that'll kind of give you an idea of what the
Okay.
Palestinian people are up
We're gonna
to.
put the link. We're gonna put that in the link when we polish up the show. We're gonna put that in the link.
Yeah, but you know, all of this is a result of colonialism and slavery.
Right.
You know, and most of it began in at the end of World War II, 1948. You know, there was no Israel. That's when the colonial powers, uh, and along with King Abdullah at the time of Jordan, who sided with Israel to create the state of Israel. And, you know, Palestinians had been living for hundreds, if not thousands of years in Palestine before Israel in 1948 was by the British. The British mandate gave Israel control of 60% of Palestine, and they would go on to massacre 17,000 Palestinians and drive them out of their homes and their villages, and change the names of the villages, change the names of the rivers, change the names of everything to try to totally erase the fact that Palestinians had lived in Palestine for thousands of years.
Sound
And
like a blue book cut right out of America's playbook.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Yes, it is. So you know, and what came out of the end of World War II was North Vietnam and South Vietnam, was India and Pakistan. India and Pakistan were one country. You know, Muslims lived in India under one nation, and it
Right.
was British who decided that they were going to divide it and create this country called Pakistan.
Right.
Um, and they did the same thing with North Vietnam and South Vietnam. They did the same thing with North Korea and South Korea.
Oh, right
Mhm.
on.
So you know all the international wars that we're dealing with now all began at the end of '48. Another horrible thing that happened in '48, I think, was more like '47, was the CIA was created, and they had what was called the Monroe Doctrine,
Right.
which said that there could not be basically any communist or socialist government established in the world. And that's when the CIA began a assassination campaign that lasted for a damn near 30 years. You know, that's why they killed Patrice Lumumba, because he had gone to the US for support, but they wouldn't give it to him, so he went to Russia. So
Right.
Russia supported a lot of the revolutionary countries in Africa that were fighting for their liberation from colonialization. And that's what happened with Cuba. You know,
Right.
Cuba was a playground for the wealthy uh, Americans.
We
And
caught a Godfather.
pardon?
We caught a lot of what was going. A lot of
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah,
What was
yeah. You
going
saw
on
that
in the
in the
Godfather.
Godfather.
Yeah.
Yeah, when Fidel and Che marched on Havana and kicked out Batista and kicked out all them rich Americans, who were pimping their country.
Right.
Fidel actually asked America for support. America told them no. So they turned to the USSR and got support from Russia. And that became a big threat for America. And so,
Is
you
that the
know,
bear?
pardon?
Is that when like when the bear pigs jumped off?
Yeah. Because the people who fled from Cuba, uh, their desire was to get Cuba back under the old system. And so the CIA helped them form this reactionary group that was going to go back and invade Cuba, and that's what they did. And they ended up getting their butts kicked in the Bay of Pigs.
Right.
And the generals asked Kennedy to bomb if they could bomb Cuba, and Kennedy said no. He refused to let the generals bomb Cuba because he understood what the implications of that would be. There would be a lot of death and a lot of destruction. And that's one of the reasons why Kennedy was assassinated.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm glad you said that.
and also because he was getting ready to pull out the advisors out of Vietnam.
Right.
And by this time, Eisenhower had warned America about the military-industrial complex.
I
Uh,
remember this.
they began to see that war was money. War was very profitable. And that's one of the reasons why they went into war with Vietnam, because it was a money-making operation, just like all the other wars afterwards.
Right. Right. It seems like, Elder, it seemed like United States really is not like a culture. It seemed like, from its inception, it's just a murder cult. It's just go around the world, taking what it want, murdering people, and the things that it take. It seemed like, the folks that they take it from would have been happily, gave it to them, or they could have made a deal over a handshake. But yet and still, they don't want to go that route. It's always death and destruction at every turn with these guys.
Yeah.
For the last 400 years.
Greed, based upon greed. That's what slavery was all about. It was all about, I mean, look, slavery, cotton became one of the largest money-making things in world history. You know,
Right,
um, and the fact that you had slaves working for free, and they didn't want to let go of that. And the British Empire played a huge role. They were the beginners of colonization. The
right.
first place they colonized was Ireland and Scotland.
Wow. Didn't know that, but that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, that was the
Wow.
first place they colonized, and
Wow.
Irish resisted. The Scottish didn't resist as much as the Irish did, but the Irish never stopped resisting. Everything that they used in slavery, they used these same techniques on the Irish people.
Right,
On the Irish people, that was their first colony. Those were their first colonies, and there, as we know, the saying was that that the sun never set on the British Empire because the
right,
British controlled empires all over the world, all over
right,
the.
right. You still with me?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm still here. So,
Okay, okay. I thought, okay, okay.
so slavery and colonization go hand in hand. They're the
And
reasons why we have what we have going on in the world today.
right,
It's the reason why we have people who are not able to live in a good life. And you're right. That it is a culture of violence. It's a culture of greed. It's a culture of destruction, not only against human beings, but against even the environment.
yes.
Against trees, against the rivers, against anything
The
that
air, water, food, everything.
everything. So this
everything.
is what we're up against.
I have, I still do have a bit of, I'm still a little naive. I still got a little bit of naive child in me, you know. So y'all forgive me for what I'm about to say, but I dream every day. I dream that the African American can exact some type of revenge uh, because they used us as a model uh, to break the backs of other countries, to rape and rob them. And they used us, to practice on. And I would love to see us, get our shit together and straighten it out, But that, it's a dream, and maybe one day it'll happen. But yeah, because in some ways I kind of feel responsible. That train done ran away the way it done. When I look at these children in the East Congo, the reason why I'm able to have this interview with you today because these children, ages 6 and up, is digging in mud with no equipment at all, with their bare hands, in rags, dressed in rags. And if they don't produce, enough materials at the end of the day, 3 things could happen to them. Either they could be beaten, murdered, or raped. And I'm just like everybody else. I'm not special in this, right? But I'm disgusted. And I'm lightweight stuck because they got so many things going on at one time. We talk about the international terror that the white supremacy pushes on people around the planet, but we even got our own situation here. What I'm saying, with the criminal justice system and the school system. Police brutality, which I heard you speak on. I believe when you was at Cambridge. Was it Cambridge you was at?
Oxford University.
At Oxford, okay. I heard you speak on that in a very powerful way. I wanted to also, before I forget, I heard you. What's this sister's name? Man, I'll loop back around to it. But I think she was one of the first female Senate or Congress back in the day.
Shirley Chisholm.
Shirley Chisholm.
Yeah.
Miss Chisholm, please forgive me for forgetting. Sometimes I get nervous and my anxiety kick in and I lose it. When I heard you tell the story about Miss Shirley Chisholm, that was so powerful to me too. And the reason why I brought it up, one, it's a powerful story, and that was a badass sister, up and down, and I've heard stories about, how they mistreated her, the white men mistreated her up there up on that hill. But the other reason why I brought it up is because Marcia Chisholm was her niece was my martial art instructor when I was a kid. And she was about the same height as Miss Chisholm. And Marcia used to bring home trophies that was taller than her. And matter of fact, she just made master. She teaches in Maryland at a place called Shaolin Wushu. And Marcia Chisholm, the niece of Shirley Chisholm, was my martial art instructor.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, man.
Shirley wasn't the only one. I mean, when she decided to run for Congress, a lot of those black congressmen wouldn't support her. They didn't want to support her. She was a woman. And the Black Panther Party was the first and probably the only organization that stepped to the table to support her.
Right. And two, when I was a kid, I tell this story often. I'm gonna give you the real short version, because this ain't the Sunny show. I'm gonna give you the short version. When I was a kid, I think I was in the third grade, and my dad, I didn't know my dad was a functioning addict, and that's the reason why we were eating I was eating like rice and eggs like for like 6 months, all the way through the summer and everything. So one day my dad, had me on punishment because I was a troubled child too. He had me on punishment, told me when you went to work, he said, don't touch that TV. And I touched the TV. I cut the TV on. And but I used to love watching PBS. I was a weird kid too, but I used to love watching PBS. And there was a documentary on about Fred Hampton. And me eating rice and eggs all the time, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Oftentimes I would, come from the pool. When you're in the pool all day, when you get out that pool, you hungry as hell. So oftentimes I would go by the 7-Eleven and steal like, some apple pies, Hostess apple pie or cherry pie, or Babe Ruth, to quell, my hunger, because we didn't have much. So when I seen, the documentary on PBS about Fred Hampton, it really resonated with me in a real way. Because here I was a poor kid, not eating that well. And to see Black people, Black men, Black women, treating these children so well and feeding them so well and loving on them and caring a great deal about them, it floored me. And I made a promise, and I fell in love with Fred Hampton. I fell in love with Fred Hampton. I didn't want to be like Fred Hampton. I wanted to be Fred Hampton. Yeah, I wanted to be Fred Hampton. And at his age, I believe it was like 19, 20, there's the accomplishments, all the clinics he put together, all the children's free breakfast programs he put together, and I won't go too much into it because I want you to talk about it. Because I believe you said you actually met the man.
Yeah.
But Chairman Fred, I love you, and we all miss you as well. And I often think, I heard you bring this up. What would the world be like right now? What would the United States be like right now if the chairman was allowed? The Black Messiah, if he was allowed to live. I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Okay. Um, if you really think about it, look how many Black Messiahs they murdered. I mean,
Right
you're
on.
talking about Malcolm X. You're talking
Malcolm,
about
Medgar.
Medgar Evers, Martin
Right,
Luther King,
right,
uh, Bunchy Carter,
right.
Fred Hampton. What would the world be like if they had to live? And Patrice Lumumba,
And
uh,
Patrice
and
Lumumba.
Patrice Lumumba,
Exactly.
and Che Guevara.
And Che.
So they were very strategic in what they were doing.
I absolutely positively, love and admire, Chairman Fred Hampton, and when I was listening to one of your videos last night, um, the way you talked about him, you loved him too, and we were talking about, all the Black Messiahs that they had, that this white supremacy program here has murdered, all the lives that it's taken away. And we took a little break. Something for the young people, because I knew Freeman, and because I knew Freeman was a former Slauson,
Mhm.
and I got into this young man, his music, something like 10 years ago, by accident, through this app. And that young man that I'm talking about is Nipsey Hussle. And when I seen his story and how well that young man's mind was put together, and when he turned around and I saw Slauson tattooed across his back, and the way he was talking, I'm like, this brother done talk to some Panthers. This brother done talk to some Panthers, in the way he was putting things together, and I feel that's another one of, during this time period, this brother could have been a great leader, you know, but because of the location, you know, with the LAPD, you know, and the history of the Panther Party there, I kind of felt that if he wasn't careful, that something, you know, bad would happen to him. And a couple of years later, I look up on the Sunday, and he was murdered. Are you familiar with you know, I should have asked you before I went off into that, but are you familiar with Nipsey Hussle?
I love Nip, man. I love Nipsey. I mean, I was so hurt when he was murdered because he reminded me of Fred Hampton. He reminded me of Bunchy Carter. You know, he was, oh my God. And the same pain that I feel from the death of Fred and Bunchy, I feel that same pain for Nipsey because he could have, you know, just like Tupac, both of them could have been the next young great leaders, you know, in Black America. And it's you know, it's very painful that that young man was killed, you know. So yeah, I've heard about him. My daughters love him, and they all have Nipsey T-shirts, and yeah, I feel you so much on that.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Because we really, you know, we really needed that young man's presence. You know, I had respect for him like he was my elder. That's how
Yeah,
much respect for him that I had, you know. And I spent some time out in LA. You know, I used to run with everybody, you know, because I was from out of town, so I ain't had to like commit to no set. So, you know, sometimes I'll be with the 121 Compton Crips. And then sometimes I'll be with the East Coast Crips. And sometimes I hang out with some Bloods, you know, or the old dirty men. You know, I made friends with the SA locals off Pico Boulevard. You know, I was everywhere. And I learned a lot, you know, being out there, you know, and how to survive and all this type of thing. And, you know, I had to dip out, you know, because I didn't want to get, you know, jumped into the gang and then I'm stuck, you know, so I was able to get out of there. But I kind of understand the culture out there and how hard it is, you know, to make it, you know. But while we on the subject of Nip, I would be remiss not to mention Bones documentary, Bastards of the Party. Are
yeah,
you yeah.
yeah. I'm familiar with that.
Would you like to elaborate a little bit more about, you know, what that documentary is about?
Yeah, it's a very powerful documentary. And what it illuminates is, you know, what a lot of those young men really were very similar to a lot of the people that joined the Black Panther Party, and the way that the Crips formed was they, you know, they were trying to follow in the footsteps of the Black Panther Party.
Right.
Um, but you know, so many Panthers in LA have been killed. So many Panthers have been imprisoned, and many Panthers were suffering from PTSD. Um, that you know, there wasn't enough elders that would be able to help and guide them into
Right.
doing what they wanted to do. And, you know, that's where Bunchy Carter came from. You know, he was head of the gang, the largest gang in LA, the Slawsons, you know,
Awesome.
and he became one of the most powerful leaders in Southern California. And he was a former gang member, a former Slawson who was connected to the Crips. So they are the bastards of the party. They
Right.
are the ones who would have taken the place of the party and
Right.
who would move things forward and who would have continued the struggle.
Right.
Um, and so, you know, and that's what that whole crack cocaine epidemic was all about. There's a book called Dark Alliance. You familiar with that book, Dark Alliance?
No, sir. But we can definitely put that in the link too.
Yeah, you should definitely put that in the link. Dark Alliances, this reporter, his name will come to me, but he spent many years investigating on how the CIA and the government was involved for pouring uh, millions and millions of pounds of cocaine into America,
Right.
and not only cocaine but guns as well.
Right.
So you know, the drugs have always been used as alcohol, just like alcohol was used against the Native Americans who we haven't talked about. There are 50 million Native Americans killed in North and South America altogether. 50
Right.
million.
That's
Uh,
crazy. That's
and
crazy.
they use all kinds of methods to destroy the indigenous culture, who tried to destroy the indigenous culture, and alcohol was one of them. Of
Right.
course, we know about the blankets with smallpox on it because
Right.
the disease killed millions of indigenous people.
Right.
Um, and also in 1972, there was a lot of cocaine in the 60s and early 70s. There's a lot of cocaine in California.
Right.
And I remember being in California in 72. It was just so much cocaine. I used it now. It was like it was raining
Right.
cocaine.
Right. Right.
And in this book, Dark Alliance, the same drug dealers that was responsible for bringing all that cocaine into America and into California uh, were working for the CIA. They were drug dealers in Nicaragua. They were known as king of cocaine.
Right.
And but also what it says in that book that they were smuggling cocaine into Northern California in 1968 and
Damn.
1971. That early, they
Damn.
were bringing cocaine into America, and that's one of the things that unfortunately Huey succumbed to was first of all snorting cocaine.
Right.
You know, because everybody cocaine was considered a casual drug. It was just something that everybody did. Hollywood actors, congressmen. You know, I snorted cocaine with some congress people. I don't want to say their name right now,
Right.
but I did because everybody was doing it. Hollywood directors, but
Right.
if you had more access to it, then you were more likely to become addicted.
Right.
And that's one of the things that happened with Huey was he did become addicted to snorting cocaine,
Right.
and along with many other things that happened. So you know, and that through cocaine is when you saw the changing and the emergence of the gangs in LA. Because before cocaine, the gangs were mainly funded by small time stuff, getting kickbacks from stores or, small time robberies and stuff like that. You know, they hadn't really grown into this thing, this monster that they grew into in the 80s.
Right.
But once cocaine became so bountiful and so plentiful, and then this new method of using cocaine, crack was created. It created a dual epidemic, a dual epidemic, which was crack, cocaine, and gang epidemic. They went hand in hand. The crack and the gang were both two epidemics that went hand in hand. And cocaine, crack cocaine, black women were the most, I'm trying to think of this word, in terms of taking care of kids. Black
Right.
mothers took care of the slave masters' kids.
No
After
doubt.
slavery, they were still taking care of white folks' kids.
Right.
And they grew to take care of the kids in the black community.
Right.
But when a black woman who had kids snorted cocaine, all her desires to take care of her kids was washed away,
Right.
was washed away. And that it, you know, the family structure, the black family structure that we had, with the aunts and uncles and the grandparents, you know, we had a built, you know, there were no black kids um, what's that when you adopt a child? What do you call that? Um,
Is
uh,
that foster care or
Foster care. There were
okay?
no black kids in foster care in the early 80s.
They
There was,
were.
by 1990s, the foster care system was flooded by black kids, maternalistic. That's the word I was thinking. Black women were the most maternalistic women in America, if not the world. You
Right.
know, and we had a system where we had if a black child, if their parents were out off the scene, there was always aunts and uncles and grandparents that would take care of them. You
Right.
know, we had that family structure in place. But after when crack cocaine hit, that structure was destroyed. The maternalism of black mothers was destroyed, and the black family began to break down. To break down, there was no more black family. There were no more aunts and uncles because they were addicted too. There were no more grandparents because a lot of them were addicted, and a lot of their grandparents had to step forward and become the parents of their their grandkids.
Grandkid. I've seen a lot of that like firsthand, you know, and unfortunately, you know, I was out there on the block, you know, the difference between me and the other kids, you know, that was out there. I lightweight knew better. You know, I lightweight knew where the drugs was coming from, what it was doing for the community, you
Mhm.
know. But I was like 19, 20, and KFC paid $121 a week
Mm.
after a grueling 8 hours a day. You know, and I thought I was taking the easy way out by selling coke. You know, I remember my first night out. It almost stopped that night. Where a married couple, a black married couple, husband and wife, came to me, and they were willing to give me their wedding rings and bands and everything,
Wow. Damn.
and I couldn't do it. You know, because I was just dipping my toe in it. You know, I hadn't, you know, I wasn't that ruthless. I had that messed up mindset as of yet. And I sent the sale down the hall because I couldn't take it. I couldn't do it. Because it
Mm.
reminded me of my aunt and my uncle.
Mhm.
People did, you know. So I made a lot, you know, I participated, you know, in our destruction, you know, and but every single day I live to try to make that up. You know, I'm proud to say I'm no longer an employee of the DEA, ATF, FBI, CIA. You know, I'm not selling their drugs anymore, and I never will. I don't care how desperate or how poor. I done slept in shelters. I done slept in alleys. I ain't never going back doing that again. You know, because I know the deal. But yeah, that's yeah. But it hurt us. You know,
Yeah.
I was to Mama Charlotte when I interviewed her, and you know, I live in the projects. By the way, the People's Dinner Party is being brought to you out of one of the most violent housing projects in Cleveland, Ohio, in Cuyahoga County, the Wilson Towers. You know, maybe like 20 minutes before I jumped on, you know, automatic gunfire, you know, during the
Mm.
daytime. You know, it wasn't even like 2 o'clock, you
Wow.
know. And what I see, and by me being how you guys, and I mean you, because your history and everybody else's history, I stand on y'all shoulders. You know, everything I am today is I look to y'all because y'all done paved the road and made it a little easier for me to find myself and find a way to participate in trying to reverse some of this craziness going on with our people, you know. But my assessment, you know, living in this project for the last 9 years, is that projects here and all across the country is basically breeding farms. You know, they don't regulate, you know, it's been regulated to a breeding farm because there's nothing but drugs, alcohol, a lot of mental health trauma going on. And one of the biggest things is like a hope. There's no hope here. You know, you look at the child face that he number 7 to 8 years old, you don't see no hope in that child eye, you know, and that's why I do some of the things that I do. But, you know, like I said, going back to the project, it's a breeding farm, you know, and it seems like they breeding for the prison system, or they breeding for to send our people to become international hitmen for their corporations. And what I mean by that, the military, you know, or work these cheap jobs that don't pay nothing with no health benefits, you know, and that seems like the project's whole existence, you know, and trying to find a way out of that is rough. You know, I heard you speak so eloquently, and I'm watching the clock too, and I'm watching your energy too, El. I'm gonna get you out of here. I know you probably need to get lunch in you and everything. You know, I'm sorry, I kind of like lost my train of thought real quick. But you know, you spoke so elegantly last night to, you know, what we going through out here on the street, you know, and what we're going through as so-called Black nationalists. And you know, it seemed like a lot of the Black nationalists nowadays, the leadership, they like want to be like movie stars or something like that. They more concerned about looking like a revolutionary than actually being a revolutionary. And some of them got game. They can spit mad game and get you locked in and all this type of thing, but they ain't really you know, the moral character is messed up. You know, when I was in Katrina, you know, with Malik, you know, we had to go up against like 41 white vigilantes. You know, a reference to that, you know, to my audience, look up Katrina's race war. Your boy was like right in the middle of that. You know, they slaughtered 19 young Black men within a 5-block radius of our house. But, you know, I kind of seen, it gave me a peek what Armageddon and so to speak would look like. You know, the King Albert Project would look like. I've seen it, a little peek. And what I learned from that is, man, you don't poke the bear. You don't sit here on social media with all this Black shit on, and you know, and this red, black, and green shit. Oh, this is the gun that I got today in the mail. Or oh, I'm going to the firing range and I'm able to shoot this far and I'm able to unload and put a clip in and all this type of stuff, you know, and fuck the police. And you wondering why they showing up at your door at 5 o'clock in the morning. And you ain't done nothing. You ain't even fed nobody. You ain't housed nobody. You ain't clothed nobody, you know, but you out here using this bullshit mantra bravado, getting yourself in trouble. One of the things I told one of the, I said, have you brothers ever heard of the word clandestine before? You know, you're on Facebook with all this stuff. You're on Messenger with all this stuff. You're on Instagram with all this stuff. Talking about you're a revolutionary. You know, how you gonna put something together, you know, and you telling your business, you know, all over social media. And I think, you know, that's kind of like slowing us up, you know, a lot, you know, and in the void of real male leadership. You know, I got in trouble here in Cleveland. I saw hungry kids and I did what I was trained to do. And next thing I know, the housing project, the housing authority jumped all over me with their police department and everything. You know, and I asked the police chief when they was interviewing me, they sat down, was interviewing me. And I was like, you know, if I were to leave here, if y'all were to get rid of me, do you have a plan in place to take care of these children? You know, to feed these kids? And it was no. You know, so I get I'm in the trenches. You know, I live in the trenches. You know, I sleep in the trenches. You know, so. But with that said, Mr. Dixon, man, look, the cover of your book, I'm sure like many a fly young ladies done told you. Cover of the book is amazing. You know what I'm saying? That joint right there should be, it's probably t-shirt and posters right now. You know what I'm saying? That joint look fly. You know, I was so enamored by your story. First time I heard your story, I think it may have been you and your brother at the Black Panther Party reunion. And shout out to Billy X. And It's About Time. Um, when I heard your story about how like you were like called to the school, you know, and like the way you tell a story, you can see it. You know what I'm saying? I was reading your book while you know was taking your break. And man, the way you tell a story, I can see that bad boy. But the thing that made me laugh, you know, and you know, it tickled me like my folks in West Virginia would say, "What tickled me so," as when you told me, you know, the Black Panther Party, Seattle chapter of the Black Panther Party was called to a school because they wasn't protecting the kids, you know, and how y'all, you know, the police tried to stop you and you told them, say, hey man, the police told you can't go in there because, you know, you got a loaded weapon. But, you know, you hadn't, you know, one wasn't in the chamber, so technically it wasn't loaded. And how y'all went up into the school and the principal took off running from y'all, you know. And you had to go chase him down and drag his butt back, you know, and tell him, you know, hey, either you gonna protect the children here or we are, you know. And man, I haven't forgotten. You talking about that Panther reunion had to be well over 20 years ago, if not longer. And I haven't forgotten that. And I always, you know, and also it seemed like I remember too, and please correct me. And like I said before, I'm watching the time. I'm gonna get you out of here. Just give me 5 more minutes. I'm gonna get you out of here. The other thing too that stood out about your story with the Seattle chapter of the Black Panther Party was this. I could be wrong about this now because I haven't read a lot of these books in a very long time, but it seemed like the police chief there was like told, you know, I'm gonna use y'all word, the vamp on y'all, and he refused to.
No. What happened was that there are three chapters that they want to destroy. That was Chicago, LA, and Seattle. And so they went to Chicago, they killed Fred. They went to LA, they had a big shootout, the DEA. And then they came to Seattle. And they went to the mayor and told the mayor that, well, we understand they have automatic weapons in their office, and we need support from the Seattle Police Department to raid their office.
Right.
And the mayor told them no.
Right. Okay.
The mayor told the DEA that no, I'm not going to give you support of the Seattle Police Department to raid their office. And when he went back to the mayor's convention a year later, he was met at the door and they told him that he wasn't welcome because he didn't carry out what Nixon wanted to do, was destroy those three chapters. I was on Richard Nixon's enemy list of 100 that he had.
That word.
Yeah, so that's the story of that.
Right on. Look, before we go, I want to give a quick shout out to some people that I really look up to. I'm lightweight, you know, on that path of being, you know, in the media. And one of my first loves, you know, as far as the media thing go, and being black and powerful. I'm not sure if you ever heard of this brother from DC named Petey Green.
Yeah, I heard of Petey Green. Yes.
I used to listen to Petey Green. Like I said, I was one of them little weird kids. Man, I'm in the fourth grade listening to Petey Green. Yeah. And I had an opportunity to meet him at the Keys restaurant downtown DC. And he was wearing an all green outfit, the afro, the glasses, the whole thing. And he invited me over to his table and we sat and we had lunch and I think I was like about 10 years old, and I'm discussing with him, you know, a program that I saw last week that he had produced. You know, so shout out to Mr. Petey Green. I love you too, you know, and thank you for, you know, creating this path for me, this lane for me, you know, because I like the way he talked and everything, you dig, and I just like his whole vibe, you know, and a lot of the important things that he had to say. you know, a true a revolutionary lumpen proletarian, you know, and also too, last but not least, Mr. Joe Madison. We lost like a giant in the media, for Black media, as far as like, you know, social commentary that's on point, that's like that. You know, the hawk himself, Mr. Joe Madison. So I like to give a shout out to them and a thank you to these guys, you know. So excuse me. Mr. Dixon, thank you so very much for coming and talking with us today at the People's Dinner Party. And I enjoyed it. I'll stay in contact with you and everything. And as soon as everything is put together, we make sure that you get it. And thank you for blessing us with your time and your presence today and your knowledge. You know, I was going over the PDF file while you had taken your break. Man, I just glanced over it. Hey, yo, y'all go out and get this book, bro. Go out and get this book, bro. You know what I'm saying? If you don't like to read, get an audio file, bro. You know, put it in your Audi or something, you know, in your truck, and listen to what this brother has to say. You know, we owe the elders everything. We don't have to reinvent the wheel thanks to them, you know. But so in closing, all power to the people. Thank you guys for coming out to the People's Dinner Party, and give a big hand, big revolutionary hand to Mr. Aaron Dixon. Thank you so very much, brother.
Thank you very much. And you
All right.
take care of yourself. All right. All power to the people.